Well, the grift keeps on grifting, and I've been accused of not providing enough proper context when critiquing X or Y grifters. So get ready, we're going to be packing a lot in. The basic gist is KP is a semi-popular YouTuber. She covers Kim Possible. I want to say very explicitly, I'm aware of Kim Possible, but have never, ever, ever watched anything really about it. So there, I'm going to be totally silent. Ironically, a very close fandom, the Little Pony stuff, I am a big fan of, but the original. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Sorry, KP is a semi popular commentator on Kim Possible and decided to get involved or insert herself into controversy with a much bigger YouTuber, Saberspark. And it gets really complicated. The essentials are that KP had a relationship with someone that Saberspark employs, right? Because he makes enough money online that he can employ a few people. And she had some bad dealings with his employee. And they hashed it out. And both sides said, well, I'm kind of sorry. And she's like, yeah. I don't really accept your apology, but whatever. Now, the direct controversy here is not about that. You can kind of see in the background, there are mixed motives of revenge, jealousy, envy, so on and so forth. So KP decided to accuse Saberspark of possibly being part of some big pedo scam, grift, gaslighting victims. And the dilemma is some victims did reach out to her, apparently, but the evidence of any bad behavior is kind of weak or thin at best. So basically, she just did this ranting video. I've not been able to see the video because she took it down. However, there are now tons and tons of YouTube videos that we're able to assess little bits and pieces of it, and basically, we're still waiting for receipts. So it just seemed that KP and some Twitter people mounted an online campaign to destroy Saberspark. Saberspark did a very effective rebuttal, and months have passed, and it seems pretty clearly she was lying, or at very best, was going with very thin evidence and just kept going on about victims, child abuse, believe the victims, yada, yada, yada. And basically seems very clear that she's a much, less popular YouTuber and wanted an opportunity to destroy Saberspark for revenge, become a bigger YouTuber, make more money, become more famous, based on a scandal that doesn't seem to be a scandal. Now, we're not saying that Saberspark is totally innocent. The rebuttal did leave out some iffy behavior by him and his friends. But again, does it rise to the level of criminal activity? It's unclear. Also, from the little bits and pieces I could gather of the video that you put out, it was done in a very jokey style, very mocking style, which seemed to be very tonally not appropriate. Again, if these are women who were abused as children, you would think take the issue more seriously, but it was a very strange video. So now KP has finally returned and is willing to talk about this incident. And, well, she really isn't apologizing. She's just acknowledging that she had good intentions, but things happened. And that's about it.
Of DA Games Associates, Chris Aficionados, and Will Ryan, another YouTuber named Steven, or Saberspark, and the association between them that creates a dangerous space for minors to occupy. Included in the video was my own testimony of interactions with Steven, as well as third-party testimony of additional interactions with Steven. The third-party testimony includes accusations of SA from a person named Emily, accusations I platformed on a video that in hindsight wasn't suited for testimony that heavy. Some other notable issues that were pointed out about my video was the tone. The general consensus was that the tone throughout the video was jokey and that I came across as making light of some serious accusations and conversations.
I've been accused of clipping people and taking people out of context, so just to finish off her thoughts, she's saying, well, the joking, memeing aspect was her way of dealing with trauma. And again, I'm not going to dive into NORA, who is another grifter I regularly target. I'm just noticing a pattern here. When a grifter gets caught and they don't really have facts or evidence or anything to back up their accusations, they go back to, I'm dealing with my trauma. I'm sorting through my trauma. Okay. And again, the implication would be that Steven is tied to this trauma. As far as I know, that's simply not true. It was an associate of Stephen, but not Stephen proper. I should note explicitly, Stephen and KP had a relationship in the past. They were much more friendly, but then they drifted apart. So you can kind of see here people who once had a background or past with one another don't like one another anymore. And things happen, right? Friends become enemies. It happens. Also, she seems to be implying that, again, she's the victim here. What is the victimization of? I don't know. And again, these accusations are what they are. They're very serious. But the dilemma is, did this even happen? Like, is Emily a real person? What exactly happened with Emily? And again, we're just given very thin details. So we're going back to, we just need to believe Emily and believe KP. And we're like just going to go in a circle. Like, well, how do we know any of this is true? And that's where we're stuck. So the wise person would say, well, unless we have a lot more here, we can't really go forward. Also, the framing of this is really deceptive. It's about the atmosphere, right? In other words, Steven and his bros, I guess, the bros in the brony little pony fandom are so toxic, they're just making things dangerous for the children. Okay, but then you're like, what does that even mean? And it's like, well, you're not specifying. So that's another thing that makes you nervous. So you're like, okay, and again, stressing, I'm not saying Steven is a saint here, right? He does take responsibility for perhaps not being as sensitive to these topics. So be it. And, we have a free market. If you don't like his stuff, you don't have to subscribe. You don't have to support him. There you go. But in terms of the main criticism that she was irresponsible, she's not really dealing with that. She just says, okay, yeah, the tone was off, but guys, I have trauma. Again, this is very close to NORA, and whenever she's confronted with, lying and insulting, slandering people with false accusations, she's like, I have trauma. Don't you understand my trauma? I have trauma. I'm coping with my trauma. And it's like, okay, well, we all have trauma, right? So it's also doing a lot of damage to people who have trauma, and it's like, okay, but even if you have trauma, you have to try to be responsible. Obviously, when you're traumatized, that's tough, but we have to be clear here. I mean, again, these are women. Obviously, many grifters are men, but in these cases, we're talking about women. These female grifters keep pulling this card of female victimization, and after a while, you're kind of realizing, well, is any of this even true? Right? I mean, you can present evidence of XYZ trauma, but should we care? I mean, again, it's a very harsh thing to say, but if you're online explicitly here for the money and the fame, you got to be a little skeptical, right? We need to be a little skeptical here. But I'm also beating around the bush. So let's get to what exactly is the issue. And the issue keeps going back to Chris, an associate of Steven. That seems to be the real beef she has. So let's let KP speak and then try to move on from this grift.
Intentions of the video. The conversation I wanted to start in the messages that fell short. Steven, or Saberspark, employs an editor by the name of Chris, who owns a Discord server. Chris is also employed by Will, who owns the DA Games Discord server. There are a lot of names to keep track of right now. Will has a past of posting pornographic, racist, incestuous, and anti-Semitic content in both his and Chris's servers. His own server, the DA Games server, having children as young as 11, maybe younger, with access to these posts. Not only do children as young as 11 have access to this content, there are also children as young as 12 given mod status. The same server also has a man accused of and arrested of child grooming. This is Will's own views on how children should be interacted with online, with some 12-year-olds are more mature than some 40-year-olds. I'd like to point out that this is a groomer mentality.
Well, let's get down to brass and tacks. Okay, right. What does this all mean? It seems what you're saying, KP is asserting, is Steven is associated with an associate who's associated with some very problematic behavior. And again, we have to double check these receipts. Is this true? Right, how bad is this? And so on and so forth. So it becomes like you're a friend of a friend of a friend, and that friend is what? A neo-Nazi pedo, whatever. And to be fair, I've had similar dilemmas here where you become associated with someone who turns out to have actual neo-Nazi points of view and issues, and you have to just be like, okay, what is going on here? So yeah, I mean, these things are real. There are Nazis online, and there are online Nazis into, there you go, many disturbing behaviors. But again, we're getting lost in the weeds here. How is Stephen guilty? I mean, is the guilt here that Stephen is not proactive enough in controlling some of his employees? Or is the charge that, well, Chris, the editor here, is actually guilty of committing crimes? Because again, we keep getting blurred up with different accusations about different things, right? I mean, what is Emily's accusation, right? The accusations are shifting back and forth that what Stephen is a pro-Nazi, he's guilty of the R word. What exactly is the thing? And again, she keeps kind of leaping back and forth. I mean, I get the basic gist that he's saying that these guys have created a really toxic online space. They're bad people. Stay away from them. Right. All that's well and good. That's fine. But mixed in here is possibly a fake accusation of the R word. That's pretty shocking, right? If she thought this bad behavior was enough, fine, just do that. But she didn't do that. She was pretty well implying that Stephen was guilty of the R word. But there's zero evidence of this. So, it seems like, and again, I face similar dilemmas where a lot of online grifters, and a lot of the online grifters are either very close to fascists or themselves fascists, like Neurotics and Mahler and the EFAP. But again, we have to be careful. Just because Gary and Mahler, right, Palum, seem to be pretty extreme right-wing racist white people, doesn't mean everyone associated with EFAP are racist white KKK people, right? This is a dilemma. We have to be careful of tracking names and associations. So it just seems that we're going back and forth. There's a toxic space here. She wants to call that out. That's fine. But where and why are we doing false accusations of the R word? Like, and she's still not answering that. How did that get into this conversation? I don't know. Also, why should you be benefiting or profiting from this? Like, why is giving you money going to help the victim? I don't know that either. So, still a very tricky, thorny mess here. But again, it's great that KP has alerted us to a problem here, but she doesn't seem to understand you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. And at least that's my verdict so far.